Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars news update. Today I've got a very exciting show planned. We have two major pieces of Star Wars news, and we begin with Dave Filoni. The new CCO of Lucasfilm has been providing us a range of updates over the last couple of days, and we begin our first segment by talking about his interpretation and his take on Star Wars' most iconic villain, Darth Vader. Ahsoka is by no means the first time Dave Filoni's had the responsibility to write and work with the character. He savoured and seized the opportunity in both Star Wars Rebels and the Clone Wars' final season. But in a brand new interview, he talks about the immense care he had to take directing Vader in live action. He acknowledges that Anakin is the most important part of George Lucas's story, and he didn't want to do anything that could mess with the character's legacy and continuity of the universe. Hayden Christensen's performance was iconic to say the least, probably one of the best moments of the first season, and so in a new interview with Entertainment Weekly, he describes what the atmosphere was like. While everyone was so excited to see Hayden reprise the role of Anakin, it was when Darth Vader was on set, everyone wanted to gather round, even though the only role Vader had to do, according to Dave, was walk a straight line. But the suit was mesmerizing. The one goal Dave had was to put his own spin on the character, and for him, that was the idea of reintroducing the world between worlds. And so looking forward, it sounds as though Dave has more plans to introduce Vader in flashbacks, but also this notion and fan theory that Vader is still a part of Anakin's character. Despite him being balanced in the Force, now a Force ghost, Vader is still a big part of Anakin's character and duality, and this could tie into the Mortis theory that Anakin is now the father, which they did hint at in animation. Ahsoka's use of Darth Vader was intended to highlight the duality of Anakin, and reflect Ahsoka's feelings of guilt concerning his fall to the dark side. The scene was impactful, and now that Dave Filoni's CCO, I'm sure we're going to see Vader pop up in multiple projects. It was awesome to see Anakin and Vader in the Kenobi show, but I think it was done better in Dave Filoni's Ahsoka Season 1. And so now my dear friends, as a reshaping of the future of Lucasfilm occurs, and Filoni prepares to write his movie, more and more fans, and now actors alike, have been calling for more expanded universe characters to make their way into canon and into live action. And the one we've spoken about most is Mara Jade. At Fan Expo in San Francisco, the beloved Vanessa, who voiced Hera Syndulla in Star Wars Rebels, has expressed her interest in playing the role. When talking about the direction Star Wars is heading in, and as we talk about this Heir to the Empire adaptation, she said this: "I would love to play Mara. Can you please call Dave Filoni and just let him know I'd love to play Mara Jade? I think we would all like to be in live action in some way. We haven't had the opportunity to do it yet. But what do you guys think? Should she play Mara Jade? Let me know down below. And if not, who would you choose?" And so moving on, we're going to be talking about the Star Wars fandom and something very few fans remember in the aftermath of the release of The Empire Strikes Back. Today, Episode 5 is often considered the best Star Wars movie ever made, and even fans back then recognised just how revolutionary this film was going to be. While it is true the movie got a lot of praise for its more dark and mature themes, especially compared to A New Hope, which was more jovial, there was a tiny minority who did not like it. There were of course a handful talking about Star Wars being flipped on its head, criticism towards Irvin Kershner, George Lucas of course, and the creative direction for Luke, Han and Leia. Some fans who loved A New Hope back in 1977 did not enjoy The Empire Strikes Back, but they were, as I say, a vocal minority. Now the reason I want to talk about Empire is that fans are well aware of the hate Return of the Jedi got for the Ewoks, and while as a fandom we often think of the special editions and the prequel trilogy, and most recently the sequels, when we hear the phrase Star Wars is dead, such a term was used all the way back in 1980, and the way those criticisms read sound very familiar. On Twitter the other day, I came across a page from a fanzine, a Star Wars fan magazine in 1981. Two Star Wars fans who jumped on the hype following A New Hope, and were responsible for 5 fan magazines. They were titled Against the Sith, Falcon's Flight, Star Journeys, Jedi Quarterly, and the Mos Eisley Tribune. Their review of Episode 5 in their January 1981 edition of Against the Sith would become the reason they would shut this fanzine. I want to read you some of the highlights. Dear readers, it's been decided by the editors to cease publication of Against the Sith. Over the past months, it has become increasingly clear to us that we cannot continue publishing a fanzine for a movie they're talking about The Empire Strikes Back, in which we find so little to recommend. We still stand by everything we felt in our first letter to fandom in May, but would word it differently now. Since then, we thought we could fool ourselves, try hard to accept the film, and put out 2 more issues, issues 8 and 9, but we realised we weren't having much fun. Not only has this film fractured individual fans' emotions, fandom is fractured. Criticisms and reviews we've heard so prominently from fans and media critics alike in more recent years as well, especially during the prequel era and then again between 2015 and 2019 for the sequels. If you want to have a conversation about the way Disney's handled Star Wars and the pop culture relevance compared to some other franchises, the idea that Star Wars is not as relevant as it once was, but there are so many arguments which resemble what we see back in this article, and fast forward to 2017, some articles published after The Last Jedi. There has always been some very harsh criticism towards Star Wars, and I think your average casual Star Wars fan kind of takes each project as it comes for what it is and hope the next project is better, or when it's good, just as good. We're seeing very similar patterns here, and check out this quote. No one has any clear idea of what the film is really about. At this point, judging from the contradictory statements from the film creators, we're not sure they know what they're doing either. We know a lot of fans have, quote, accepted The Empire Strikes Back, but we wonder how much they really love it, as they loved Star Wars. They're talking about A New Hope. And look, I get it. Fans love the original trilogy more than they love most Star Wars, and The Empire Strikes Back is revered as the best out of any Star Wars movie ever made. The hate towards the sequel trilogy is different, the contexts are very different, the sort of movies being made in the 70s are not the same as today, but the criticism I just read you, especially the term accepted, reminds me a lot of criticism following the rise of Skywalker. I do believe it's worth asking the question based on this, how will the sequel trilogy age? And how will shows like Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, and other series which at the time seem a bit controversial, some say the writing was all over the place, how will Star Wars fans in 10, 20, 30 years time think of them? Are they going to be seen as classics? Does it depend on what Star Wars does next? The review goes on to say this: the filmmakers took themselves too seriously, and the fandom is following suit. It happened in Star Trek, and when this happens, we split. And this was in 1981. I think Star Wars will ultimately be fine, as long as there are fans, as long as those fans are loving what they love. I'm not saying it couldn't and shouldn't be better, but as you can see, we've been hearing this same narrative for decades. They finished their review with this: we are not the only fans, fan editors, or Star Wars enthusiasts who have jumped ship. Several prominent editors have let us know their misgivings, and at least 2 others have washed their hands of the sequel and, quote, the future of the Star Wars saga. I fear that there are some fans who don't realize this. What's so ironic about this is that Star Wars went on to be one of the most popular franchises of all time. George Lucas changing the formula, upping the stakes, broadening his world in The Empire Strikes Back, but even what came after it, Return of the Jedi, The Phantom Menace, they all contribute to why Star Wars was so great, even in those moments considered imperfect. I would argue Star Wars' quote perfection is in those imperfections. I know it sounds cliche and rather cheesy, but it's true. We also have to consider the age demographic. The prequel trilogy is loved by fans who were kids at the time. The same might be said of some of these shows. But what do you guys think? I just wanted to share this tidbit with you. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. May the Force be with you, always.